When, where, and to whom we were born to makes up the soundtrack of our lives. Often, the music linked to our childhood is not our own. They're songs our parents enjoyed as they cleaned up, or from the radio stations they loved. In time, we discover the tunes that resonate and become part of our life story. Our music choices were our first steps towards independence. Perhaps we love and listen as adults because the music is the common ground we have with that awkward teenager who plays a role in every life decision we make. Before we know it, we've become our parents, sharing parts of our coming of age with our children.
What is your favorite album? Would you let your kid listen to it? What would you tell them about it? What do you think they would think of it?
My favorite album, just off like, if I had to think about like what I played the most in my lifetime probably.
It's a toss-up between a Tupac album and Biggie. I'm gonna go with Biggie, and I'm gonna say it's Ready to Die.
Is Ready to Die by Biggie.
Only Built for Cuban Links by Raekwon.
The first rap album I ever physically bought was Reasonable Doubt.
Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt.
Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt.
Second one would be Reasonable Doubt.
The Black Album is probably my favorite album.
Outside of Reasonable Doubt, my favorite album would probably be It's a Big Daddy Thing, going back to '88.
Life and Times, Sean Carter.
Kingdom Come, I think it was.
My favorite album would be Kingdom Come.
Illmatic.
Let's say the Firm album. Nas, Dre, Nature, AZ, Foxy. I remember that album. I listened to it a lot in high school.
Cuban Links came out in '95, I believe, and I was about 13.
I was 20 years old when it came out. Must have been about 12. Shout out to my brother, Hollywood.
I was about 14 when Kingdom Come came out.
I probably heard it when I was like 10. And I still didn't understand, certain vulgar songs until I got older.
I was trying to understand it, but I didn't fully understand it till about 15, because of the things I was into.
Growing up, Big Daddy Kane was my favorite rapper, and I could always go back to that album at any time.
I think I was around 14 years old when I actually started to really listen to hip hop and started doing it myself.
My parents didn't really let me listen to that type of music just freely like that. So by the time I got into bootleg CDs, I got my hands on it.
For me, it was a dope album. I liked Dre beats, and then having Nas being one of my favorite artists, and Nature at the time.
He's cutting through the different flows, the beats, you know what I'm saying? It's something about it.
And being as though I was from New York, Jay-Z was the main person I was listening to back then.
Something about that storytelling that just grabbed me.
It declares Jay-Z's genealogy of when he started to where he is now.
Kingdom Come was about success. It bridged the gap between Jay-Z's premature success.
And how I compare with that is the same thing in my life where, starting from the bottom to where I am now.
And his major success.
What I think about the song 30-something, right now, being as though I'm in my 30s and everything like that, I kind of understand some of the stuff that he was saying back then.
Funny thing, I went to a Catholic school, so we would hear more so pop. We would hear more so R&B.
My favorite album is, it's actually an R&B album.
Honestly, it'd probably be a Neo album.
It came out in 1996 As Yet, self-titled, and it's by the group As Yet.
He's a great artist.
It's a hidden gem that not a lot of people know about, unless you were really into music like that.
The man, he writes, you know what I'm saying? He musically puts things together very well. Now, Sacred now.
If I'm looking for some motivation, I'm looking for, some real true artistic value. I'm a hit Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. That never changes because that's, she has duality to her.
Fred Hammond. And the album is called The Spirit of David, and it speaks about worship to God and having honor and knowing what worship is.
I definitely would let my kids listen to it.
No question with the Spirit of David album.
My son is definitely a Jay-Z fan, and my daughter, she'll listen to it only if I'm listening to it.
Would I let my daughter listen to it? Probably not.
Now, even though there's a baby on the cover of that album, I wouldn't let my daughter listen to it until...
Probably when she becomes a teenager, maybe.
To be honest, between 12 and 14.
I wouldn't let my kids listen to it now, but I always talk to them about the rap music they listen to.
I think I would wait some time to play it for them for the first time, preteen, maybe almost teenager, something like that, but I'm sure they're gonna hear you know, a lot worse than what's on that album in their current music.
They probably think it's a little bit dated. I mean, it came out in '96. Music has changed drastically since then.
They're not talking about anything.
I think a lot of the music is very just kind of straightforward. I don't need to go into the actual lyrics, but you know, we know what it is. If somebody wants to do something with you in today's music, they just gonna say it straight out. Whereas back in the day, and I can't believe I could actually say that now, but back in the day, it was a whole different process. It was a lot more subtle. There was a lot more mystery to it.
My sons have listened to the album. And of course, Jay-Z's messages back then were a lot different than they are now.
I'd have to do a lot of, not explaining, but putting things in perspective.
I don't think she will understand it right away. Of course, I would have to walk her through it.
However, the messages are one thing. They mostly just listen to it and like the beat, like his flow to the beat, the fact that he can put those words together the way he does so beautifully.
Honestly, with the climate of today's society, I don't think she would grasp it because things are constantly changing and what's, you know, we're not gonna get into that, but.
I would love my son to listen to that at a certain point in his life. I mean, where he's able to understand, you know, the elements of life and culture, you know, and just growing up.
So from that point of view, I would love for my kids to be able to listen to it to see how they respond to it. Because they might actually be able to understand the words that are being said. I would emphasize that they listen to the story to try to understand where he's coming from.
But around that age, I was able to analyze things, become more analytical of the message on my own.
Wu-Tang is heavily influenced by the nation, the 5% nation.
I've always been big on like the lyricism in music.
As far as my kids listening to it, well, more so my son, I mean, he probably wouldn't understand it. It was like a lot more like mob theme, kind of Queens, drug stuff.
Reasonable Doubt album, I'm gonna teach them, listen, start from the bottom.
Jay-Z never forgot where he came from.
In some cases, he's kind of warning and telling guys to not do certain things. This is what Hov did versus what Jay is doing. You kind of point that out as well.
I would let them listen to it because it talked about poverty and about dreaming.
I try to show him the ropes and where I'm from and also expose him to different things, you know.
And I would just explain to him the ups and downs of life in general, how one day you can be up, the next day you can be down, but it's always how you react to when you're down is what brings the best out of you in life.
I'm not agreeing with it, but he did what he had to do to where he is now. And I would teach them a really hardcore lesson of, you know, grind and work your behind off to get where you want to go. Even more specifically, to get where God wants you to be.
How you could focus and dream about something that you never thought was attainable, and then actually reach it. That's something that B.I.G actually spoke about a lot in that album, and of course it has some ratchet stuff that I actually love.
I wouldn't let my children listen to a lot of what I listen to. And not children, but my daughter.
It's, you know, prior to Me Too. It's a lot of misogynistic, you know, references in it.
I think my son would probably look at Ready to Die and say, Dad, I can't believe you were listening to this.
I think, you know, as she gets older, she makes her own decisions. Hopefully I could train her in a way where she would want to put things in her ear that brings some type of motivation and some type of stimulation in a different route.
Music today has gotten sort of out of hand with, you know, vulgar language, things like that.
Look, this is what was going on then. You have some things right now in, you know, whatever year this is that I'm talking to her, and you will continue to see those things get better in the sense of us realizing, okay, this might have been wrong, you know, but I can take things from it that might be, you know, good or a teaching moment.
Like, it was that kind of thing, but that's probably one of the reasons why I liked it. So I think he probably would be a little bit, you know, not understanding a lot of things that's going on in the album.
That will be like a moment where I have to like educate her on certain things because she hasn't already gotten those things yet.
I don't think they'll be able to connect to it in the same way, you know what I'm saying? I think it'll kind of be insightful to them. They promote some questions, you know, get them talking, get them thinking a little bit differently. But I would definitely tell them it's a good album. And again, just focus on the words and what he's actually saying.
They had different slang, street slang, and as well as 5% slang that you know, it would be like coded language. They say it's mathematics, but, you know, for lack of better terms, it would be coded language.
A lot of the music my kids think is old because, you know, back then and compared to the music nowadays is completely different. Nowadays music is really party music. It's not really like lyrical or anything like that. So my kids pretty much wouldn't really listen to that type of stuff.
He's a big fan of like that new mumble music, that new dance music. Biggie's not that. Biggie's lyrics. So I would actually have to educate him on listening to music instead of just vibing and dancing to it.
I like music where people find different ways of communicating the same idea, the same thought, or the same feeling.
Illmatic is a soundtrack of that turning point you face, like with peer pressure and everything.
That always brings me back.
Those are not great albums, but I remember those albums because those are the albums at the time when I was coming up listening to hip hop. I started to understand, like, man, like this album, I understand what's going on. Like I'm starting to kind of understand the world.
This world is yours, you know what I mean? Like I could just go in, whose world is this? The world is yours. The world is yours. Like that's the message right there. It's empowering. So I would definitely want him to listen to the album. But like I said, at age, it will have to be that turning point going into middle school.
And by the way, we are expecting another one by God's grace.
Because I feel like certain substances, you know, it correlates to the mind, and the mind has to be able to pick up that frequency. So that's what I would suggest to my son.
I would teach that child, no matter what the sex is yet, that worship is a lifestyle.
I think the mind is very interesting. You know, you in certain instances you see you could put something in somebody's face that's upside down and the mind will flip it itself, you know, and that's how powerful the mind is. So imagine hearing these words over and over and over again. You know, eventually your mind, you know, starts to train your body, and form follows function, you know, so eventually you start to live it out yourself.
I would definitely let my child listen to that album. I think they need to know where they come from, what their roots are. I mean, I live in Brooklyn right now. My child's going to be from Brooklyn, so they need to know what Brooklyn's all about.
You can literally tell how someone raps, where they're from or where they're influenced from.
The 5% Nation started in the, I want to say, the early 70s, after following the death of Malcolm X. Their leader, Clarence 13X, was also a member of the Nation of Islam. He got suspended around the same time Malcolm X did, and he started kind of like maybe pseudo or offshoot of the Nation of Islam, and had his own following.
I think it's a little bit over his head.
They didn't grow up with the album the way that I did, so they couldn't touch it or feel it the same way I did.
I could just imagine him listening to a record like, Dad, why everybody in Queens sell drugs and everybody's like a mobster? It's like, not really. I mean, it's just some Queens, you know, we came up watching The Godfather. That's like, you know, the Black Godfather kind of tale for us.
So I think they would see it more like a movie, you know, it's like these made up characters, but hopefully seeing that the characters did have some worth when it comes to them.
Queens hip hop is typically a smoother type of rap, you know, from your LL Cool J's, you know what I mean? Even your Run DMCs, you know what I mean? Your Lost Boys, your you know, Ja Rule, you know, they all made smooth music. Like they kind of dealt with the men and the women with their rap. It wasn't just all gunplay, you know what I'm saying? It was party music too, you know what I mean?
And I honestly think my son would take it as an extension of his dad, because you know, he saw my upbringing.
I learned a lot of my history and a lot of politics through listening to Jay-Z or Nas, or like, so those things is just your coming of age.
Kind of warning and telling guys to not do certain things. This is what Hov did versus what Jay is doing. You kind of point that out as well, but all in all, it's just about staying on top of them and making them understand that, you know, that's street culture. Sometimes it's oftentimes it's celebrated, but then at the same time, put it in perspective.
I was a member of the Universal Zulu Nation at the age of 13, or maybe just about to become 14.
Because you listen to any type of music, it does transform you in some way. But I overall think that I just didn't want my children to listen to that, or my daughter to listen to that, because you know, I want her to listen to stuff with a lot of positivity in it.
A lot of hip hop that had already been heavily influenced in my life. It just took it a step further because that's hip hop's first family.
That's not what they grew up in. So trying to traverse a hood, quote unquote, or dealing with certain pressures of being a young black man in an urban environment, they're not really living that. My kids don't really get to see that side of the game for real. You know, I try to show them things and keep them away from things that may cause them harm.
Due to my family, I wouldn't say pro-black, but, you know, definitely into our culture.
It depends what they listen to too as well. You know, I would let her listen to Lauryn Hill, I would, because, you know, Lauryn Hill is a powerful young black woman at this time that when she wrote the album. So I would want my daughter to see what the possibilities are in her life to create something like that. So for that, in that situation, I probably would. But not the hip hop now. I'm not sure. And it depends, you gotta search. You gotta dig through the crates.
I don't think my kids would be able to identify with it.
That's a real fancy and nice way of saying I got into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.